All right, welcome in everybody to the Laces Out podcast. With me, as always, is Coach Kenny Simpson. I am Kirk Simpson, and we're here talking all things Miami Dolphins football. In this episode, we're going to go over some potential pre-draft trades. We have the 2021 NFL Draft coming up this Thursday. It is April 26th when we're recording this. We're going to go over some hypothetical scenarios for trades that we think may or may not play out, things that we think could be advantageous to the Dolphins, trades that we maybe wouldn't make. Kenny, do you have anything before we jump in?
No, I think we've talked before, and hypotheticals are hard to deal with, so we'll probably try to do the best we can to be realistic. But like you mentioned, I think we are in a spot where we could get some trades. We talked about that last episode a little bit. 6 is a good spot, and so I think there's going to be opportunity somewhere. It may not be a great deal, but down. And so I know we're going to throw out a couple of hypotheticals we think are possible and then kind of give our opinion on it. But I really think the one we're not going to talk a lot about tonight is at 18. And I think that's where more than likely you see us trade is the 18th pick. I know tonight we're focusing on pick number 6.
Sure, and you've talked about that in the past. I think, again, hypotheticals are tough to predict. One thing I want to talk about before we dive in here is that everybody fixates on the first round. That is not where the bulk of trades happen in the NFL draft. The bulk is the 4th, 5th, 6th, the meat of the draft where those trades actually play out. So I think that's something important to cover just before we start diving in, talking about first round trades. We do have 2 second-round picks as well. You talked about number 18. You could package potentially, one of those second-round picks with 18 and move up or down. You could go for a player. We've talked about kind of all the different scenarios in our podcasts in the past, but I think before we start talking about this number 6 overall pick and where we think trades might play out, it's important to just bring that to light that you're more likely to see trades involving those late first and early second round picks than you are probably in the top 10.
Right, I agree. And like you said, and you mentioned at the meat of the draft, 4, 5, and 6, we have 1 pick.
Yeah, and 1 5th round pick.
If we want to, but you can fix that by getting rid of one of those higher picks, maybe picking up multiple late. So that's a possibility. I don't think we do that. I feel like having 5 picks in the top 80 some odd picks, I don't need to do that in this draft. So in my opinion, if we trade down, we're looking at either acquiring a player or acquiring future picks, which I know you're not a big fan of, but our GM is a big fan of.
Yeah, and I would disagree. I'd like more picks in the meat of this draft. Like you talked about, we have 1 in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. But it just depends on the value you can get. Can you get 2? Maybe you can stretch it into 3 picks if you get rid of one of those second-round picks. We'll see how it plays out. But, yeah, I like those meat of the draft picks because if you can get 3 or 4 of those guys, usually you're going to hit on one of them. But the first scenario that we have kind of outlined, we have 5 hypothetical drafts or draft trades that we're going to go over. The first one we have is between the Cowboys and the Dolphins. The Cowboys, obviously, an interesting situation. They had the devastating injury to Dak Prescott last year. Would be interested to see what they might consider. But this is a trade I saw on a different blog, and I thought it was interesting. So in this trade, the Cowboys would get our number 6 overall, and they'd get our 3rd round pick at number 81. We would get their number 10 pick, so we would swap in the first round, their 4th round pick at number 138, and Amari Cooper. Now, before we start talking about the details of this trade, it's important to point out that Amari Cooper's contract is a 5-year, $100 million contract with $60 million guaranteed. It runs through 2025. There's a potential out in 2022 with $6 million of dead cap. He is the 4th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL currently, behind DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, and Keenan Allen. So, Kenny, what do you think of that potential trade? We basically swap our 1st, we swap a 3rd for a 4th, and we get basically our feature wide receiver in Amari Cooper.
Well, I liked it a whole lot before you talked about the contract. I mean, I still would make that trade, and I'll kind of go into the reasons why. And I think you're going to give the flip side of the coin why you wouldn't make that trade. I make that trade because right now we're looking at drafting an Alabama wide receiver who could be an NFL star. Why not just move down to 10 and get the guaranteed thing? I got to go watch the Cowboys live. They played the Dolphins. I've got to watch the Cowboys when they played the Seahawks. And so I've got to watch them play. I've got to watch Amari Cooper play. He's open every play. Every play he's open, and he's open by a lot. Better than any receiver Miami has had in a long time, and better than any receiver Miami's probably going to be able to draft, honestly. So if you're looking at hitting a guaranteed home run, you get Amari Cooper. You also have the 10th pick. And so your offensive lineman you're wanting, Kirk, you can get Amari Cooper plus a left tackle. Why in the world would you not make that trade in my mind? Now, I understand the cap scares people, but here's the deal. We have a rookie quarterback for about 4 more years. So we're way ahead of the game on that. By the time we got to figure out Amari Cooper, he's going to be at the point we're probably getting rid of him after 4 or 5 years. And now you got Tua. And it's not like you had to give up a first-round pick. All we did was move down. We just moved down 4 spots. You could still pick another receiver if you wanted to double up. You could go Waddle and Amari Cooper and get – so there's a lot of things you can do in that trade. I actually think Dallas would be foolish to offer that to us.
I would agree with you on that. I don't think Dallas makes that offer. I do think it's interesting. We talked about some of the puts and takes of that trade. Obviously, Amari Cooper's a guaranteed number 1 receiver. He has an out in 2022 as far as you talk about salary cap restrictions, and with the cap being down due to COVID, you could get out of that and it wouldn't be extra painful. We've talked about flexibility throughout this Miami offseason being a key, and I think that is probably the drawback where you lock yourself in with a long-term deal on a highly paid wide receiver. But the scenario you outlined where you make that trade and then you draft probably the second offensive tackle in this draft at number 10, maybe number 3 if somebody drafts number 2 ahead of you, I think that's an interesting potential position to be in. I'm not totally sold on Amari Cooper. I know that he is a dude. I know that he is a number 1 receiver, but you have a lot of wide receivers on your depth chart at that point. I watched him catch a 99-yard receiving touchdown against Auburn in the 2013 Iron Bowl. I know that he is a stud, but he's just not maybe the wide receiver that I'm looking for and maybe where I'm looking to commit that money long term. But again, I think it's a very interesting potential trade. So I wouldn't rule it out. If we made that trade, I wouldn't be, the old man sitting, this is terrible, we're going to be awful next year, I can't believe we would do that. I would just kind of have to have a wait and see how it plays out type of mindset on that.
Sure.
Yeah. Now the second trade that we're moving into is Broncos and Dolphins. You're going to see a couple repeats here, but this has been rumored a lot. I saw an article today about maybe the Broncos moving up for the number 5 pick with Cincinnati, which could happen. I think that the value there for the Broncos would have to be the exact same because they're moving in front of the Dolphins, who don't want to take a quarterback at number 6. So in this trade, we have the Broncos getting the number 6 overall pick. We have the Dolphins trading back to their number 9 slot and getting Jerry Jeudy, the second-round wide receiver. I really think this is very, very, very unlikely. If this happened for the Dolphins, I would be ecstatic. I would think we would totally fleece them in this situation. But unless they really, really like a quarterback, if they feel 100% sold on Trey Lance, you still have John Elway making a lot of decisions there in Denver. Maybe he finds a quarterback that he's in love with and he decides to do that. But Jerry Jeudy last year, he played in all 16 games. He had 856 yards as a rookie. We know about his pedigree coming out of Alabama. He was viewed as probably the wide receiver number 1 in last year's draft, which was a pretty deep wide receiver draft. Kenny, what do you think about that trade?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think this is probably not for Jeudy, but I think Miami, Denver are the 2 teams you're going to hear a lot from because of the quarterback. So I think your most likely team that really would want to come up to 6 is probably going to be Denver, because I do think they're looking at getting ahead of Detroit to possibly get a quarterback. So one of those 4 guys is going to fall. If Denver's in love with that guy and they're scared Detroit might take him, we would make the most sense to trade with. So that part I think is realistic. Getting Jerry Jeudy to move down 3 picks is probably very unrealistic because, again, I don't think he's Amari Cooper. I don't think he's in the same class as Amari Cooper. I'm a huge fan of Amari Cooper, but I will say basically Jerry Jeudy is one of these rookies with a year of experience. So you're getting a more player, and you're only moving down to 9. So again, you still have plenty of options there. Again, if this trade worked out for Miami, Miami has to come out and say, we won this, because you got your receiver. You still basically would end up with almost 3 first-round draft picks. If you got a Judy plus 9 plus 18, you could really load up your offense.
Yeah, and I would even say Jerry Jeudy is higher than a number 1 draft pick. We talked about why I want picks this year. Well, it's because you're talking about a 3-year window for where guys you can actually see where they fall. If you have a guy that's already had 1 year in the league, you're basically leapfrogging that entire curve. So that's why I like getting picks now. That's why I like getting young guys on rookie deals and seeing how they pan out. And I think that would be I would be ecstatic if that was offered. I don't see that happening. Broncos would basically need to be motivated to leapfrog the Carolina Panthers and the Detroit Lions, basically thinking that they're going to take a quarterback. I mean, it's up in the air. I could see either of them taking a quarterback. I don't know that I would call that the, odds-on favorite for what's going to happen, but I think one of them definitely could. So if you get to pick number 6 and quarterback 1, 2, and 3 are off the board, the Broncos are in love with quarterback number 4, maybe. The Dolphins would need a lot of leverage to make that happen, and they would need to basically have a very good poker face to actually see that happen. But moving right along.
Side note, real quick, do you think Jerry Jeudy or who was the first one we talked about from
Amari Cooper?
Cooper.
Yeah.
Do you consider those the same receiver? Because I do not consider those the same receiver.
Not at this point, but in 2, 3, 4 years, I think Jerry Jeudy has maybe a higher ceiling than Amari Cooper, I would say. If you talked about some of the evaluations about him coming out of Alabama football, you think about it, when Jerry Jeudy was the wide receiver number 1 at Alabama, they had Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith. He was the number 1 for that entire 4-deep NFL first-round draft pick crew. I think that's a hell of a resume.
And who was his quarterback back then too?
It happened to be a guy by the name of Tua Tagovailoa.
There you go.
Yeah. So moving right along, trade number 3, Cowboys Dolphins yet again. This is where things start to get a little bit interesting. This is where some conjecture starts to move in. I apologize. My dogs are seeing something out the window, so hopefully they're not too loud for you. But the Cowboys would get Xavier Howard, the Pro Bowl quarterback out of Miami. The Dolphins would get the number 10 overall pick. This idea comes courtesy of Fin Fanatic, a blog about the Miami Dolphins. Before we get into the value of this trade, Xavier Howard is currently on a 5-year, $75.25 million deal, runs through 2024. There's an out in 2022 with only $2.8 million in dead cap. That doesn't sound like a lot to you or I, but I'm sure for an NFL team managing cap, that sounds like a hell of a lot. And then potentially it opens the window for the Dolphins to draft J.C. Horn, the first cornerback, as his replacement. Kenny, what do you think about that trade?
I would be very upset. We've got a lot of these scenarios. We're going to hit 5 of them, and only one of them would have me yelling at the TV, and this would be that one. Miami Dolphins have exactly 1 Pro Bowl player on their team, or all-pro player. His name's Xavier Howard.
Don't forget about Jason Sanders.
Yeah, that's right. I guess we have 2, okay? But I wouldn't want to trade either one, but Xavier Howard, when you finally hit on a corner after some of the garbage guys we've picked over the last 5-10 years, when I've watched us pick a guy 2nd round, 3rd round, 1st round, they don't pan out. You finally hit on one that it kind of came out of nowhere. And in my opinion, this guy's the best at his position, which is the premier position on defense in the NFL. I don't care if he wants $1 gazillion. You find a way to pay the man. You don't trade him. You definitely don't trade him for 1 first-round pick. You think about, we traded Laramie Tunsil away, and we got apparently everything Houston owned. Why in the world are we going to give up Xavier Howard in his prime to get these? Now, the flip side of that coin is he could possibly get injured. He does cost a lot of money. Is he going to be drama? Well, here's the deal. I don't care about the injury. It could happen to anybody. Pay him and he won't be drama. And you have potentially the best defensive back core in the NFL.
I would agree with you there. I think the only way that this trade even gets talked about is if the rumors about Xavier Howard being unhappy with his contract are true. We've touched on those in the past. I don't think we really need to get in depth about those. I think those are just rumors. He's still a top 5 cornerback in the NFL as far as compensation goes. I think if he does get traded, a good proxy is maybe the Jalen Ramsey trade, where you talked about the Jags getting 2 first-round picks in 2020 and 2021 and a 4th-round pick for him. So the value's not quite there for a guy that's on a big deal like Xavier Howard. Again, I wouldn't want to see him go. I wouldn't be happy to see him go at all. Cornerbacks take an exceptional long time to develop, and I think that leaves us with a glaring hole in our defense, which is something that Brian Flores obviously prides himself on. That being said, I mean, it is interesting to potentially you would have number 6 and number 10 at that point. So it's not like you're swapping picks like the other trades that we've talked about. You could go with your wide receiver at number 10, and then maybe your or at number 6, and then your cornerback at number 10. It opens up some other avenues, some more flexibility. You have more guys on rookie deals at that point. Again, I don't see it happening unless Xavier Howard asks for it to happen. So let's hope that doesn't happen, and we can move along with this nonsense and see him next year. Now, the 4th trade that we're going to go over is the Dolphins and the Browns. In this trade, the Browns would get our 3rd-round pick, number 81 overall. The Dolphins would get running back Kareem Hunt, which, again, I think this is an interesting proposal. We saw the Dolphins make a trade for Matt Breida last year. I think a 3rd-round pick for Kareem Hunt, I think is certainly something the Browns would entertain. That's a very high value for a guy that's their running back number 2 right now. It allows the Browns to have Nick Chubb take over as their true the guy in Cleveland, which he kind of did last year, but he split carries a little bit with Kareem Hunt. And the Dolphins get a feature back who's handled number 1 duties in the past. Obviously, he does have some off-the-field baggage, but he seems to have moved past that and be performing in Cleveland. What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know. If this trade happened, I'd probably just kind of be like, I don't think Kareem Hunt is going to be some guy going to come in and have 1,000-yard rushing seasons. I do think he was our best running back instantly, and so there's value there. I don't know if he's much better. I think he's a little better, but I'm a big fan of this year. I can't think of his name.
Gaskin?
Yeah, Gaskin. I think Gaskin is not as good as a Kareem, but I think they're similar backs. So really, I think if you're Miami, you're probably looking more for a thicker bell cow, where you got Gaskin kind of catch the ball a little bit. I wouldn't be upset to get Kareem Hunt. I mean, that guy is really good, and I wouldn't be really upset to give up a 3rd-round pick for him. Just kind of one of those trades where I'd go, if it happens and we can take it. Again, he's had some exceptional years. Running backs, usually at this point, we would probably be his last team. But you're basically going to give a 3rd-round pick probably for 2 or 3 years worth of a guy where, 3rd-round picks are question marks. So I would be okay with it. I don't know if he's necessarily a guy I would have targeted.
Yeah, and 3rd-round picks, like you talked about, definitely have value. Can you draft a running back in the 3rd round that's going to be better than Kareem Hunt? You're one, definitely not. Maybe long-term, maybe. Kareem Hunt is 5'11", 200 pounds. So, I mean, he's a little bit thicker than Gaskin, but he's definitely not measurably, a bell cow that you can give 20, 30 carries a game. He had 841 yards to the Browns last year. That's probably better than anyone in Miami right now. Would be an interesting scenario for sure. Giving away a 3rd-round pick gives me some pause, but I think that's what you would have to give to really get the Browns to be receptive. And I think the Browns would take that trade in a heartbeat, which would make it interesting. So
yeah,
that's kind of,
I see if we don't pick a guy in the first 2 rounds, then that becomes very, very viable.
Yeah. Where you're basically trading a 3rd-round pick for a starting running back right off the bat, which at that point, yeah, I would be interested in that. You'd have 4 picks ahead of him. You could address some of your holes, and then you could say this 3rd-round pick is going to turn into our starting running back right away. So that's something definitely to consider. The 5th trade that we have to go over is, again, the Dolphins and the Broncos. You have that number 9 pick for Denver, looking at moving up to number 6 to take that quarterback. You have the Dolphins and the Broncos basically swapping those picks, and then the Broncos betting on their future, giving us their 1st-round pick in 2022. Yet again, I think another trade that the Dolphins would be thrilled with. What do you think about it, Kenny?
Yeah, I think that would be the trade that if you're Miami, you take. Now, of course, you're going to give you Jerry Jeudy. You're going to take him too. But if I'm Denver, I'm much more willing to give you a first-round pick next year than to give you who I think is probably our number one receiver. You're going to draft a quarterback. I don't see them letting go of probably his best target. And so to me, this is more realistic on Denver's end. If they want to move up, Miami's going to hold their feet to the fire. It's going to be something. My guess is you're looking at probably a first-round pick. You look at what we gave up to go from 12 to 6. We gave up a first-rounder. We weren't desperate for a quarterback. Denver is. So I could see them to go from 9 to 6 and guarantee they get the guy they want if they're wanting a quarterback. They want to keep Jerry Jeudy because they got a guy to throw the ball to. More realistic than the first one.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want Drew Lock to kind of be your guy going forward, which I don't think Denver does. Now, Kenny, let me ask you a question about this trade. Given the choice, let's say Denver says you can pick one of these two options. Which would you pick? We're going to swap from number 6 to number 9. We'll give you our first round in 2022 or our second round in 2021. Which do you pick? Because I would go second round in 2021. What do you think?
I go first round all day because again, I know we're a little different on that. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. One, I think Chris Greer thinks that way. I'm also thinking exit strategy on Tua. If Tua
yes.
Out, and I got a first round pick next year, so now I have 2. I have 2 first round picks in the next draft. Now I have the capital. Let's say Miami struggles next year, wins 6 games. It's pretty clear that we, for whatever reason, I don't think it's going to happen. But let's say Tua is not the guy. All right. Well, now we're going to have a high pick. We're going to have Denver's pick. That gives you the capital to move up. If Tua does really, really well, then you still have 2 first-round picks next year. And I think if you're Miami, if you go from 6 to 9, you're still going to get a receiver. You might have wanted Devontae Smith and you end up getting Jalen Waddle or vice versa, but you're probably getting one of the 2.
Yeah, and I think this is where we flip-flop because you're a coach and you're more patient and willing to wait and let guys pan out. I'm a fan, and so I'm saying get me that guy this year, and then let's get him immediately into the NFL program and see how he develops. And then by next year, we're sitting there, we're saying, hey, this is a guy that's primed for a breakout season. So I think that's just difference in philosophy. I don't think there's really anything other than just a difference in preference there. So I would go second round this year. You would go first round next year. Before we kind of wrap up, those are our 5 trades that we've gone over. Is there anything else you want to discuss as far as trades go for the 2021 NFL Draft?
I've beat the drum enough. I won't hammer too much, but I think that 18th pick is where you're going to see Miami. I think they're either going to make a move to move down and acquire picks this year like Kirk's wanting. They may move down and acquire picks for next year's draft. I could see a team wanting to go from, let's say, mid-20s to 18 and give up a first. You take that. You take that every day of the week. You take that trade. So that's a tradable pick. And then you mentioned 2 second-round picks. I highly doubt we sit pick 2 guys at those picks. I think we're moving out of one of those spots, possibly for future picks or later in the draft or a player. I just don't see us sitting still at 36 and at 50. I think we're probably going to be targeting people and moving around.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree with you that it's on the table there. I think if you see 18 traded, it's probably packaged with another pick to make a big move. We'll see how that pans out. But again, if we do trade that number 18 pick, I just want to remind you, Kenny, that Najee Harris, the running back that you really like, is probably involved somewhere around there. Kadarius Toney is probably going to be gone between the 18th and the 30-something pick that we have. Micah Parsons, if he slides, you could see somebody potentially trading up to 18 to grab him, and he could be very useful in Miami as well. So just a reminder on those prospects that could be there at number 18. But I agree with you that the package number 18 and 36 move further up in the first round, get some additional picks in the meat of the draft. There's a lot of avenues open. This is the benefit of having a lot of picks in the NFL draft.
Right.
So with that, I think we've covered pretty much everything that we meant to cover today. Kenny, do you, again, have any final thoughts just before we sign off?
No, man, I'm excited. First time for a long time, been excited about the upcoming season, not just the draft. And, getting to watch these guys play off. And I know you and I are going to come on later and kind of do our version of the draft. Of course, we're all fans. We all want everything to go well. But we mentioned it a show ago. We'll mention it again. We'll continue to mention it. If we hit on half of our picks, you're going to have 3 starters coming out of this draft that can contribute, and that's really all you need. And so hopefully Miami will be able to not just have a lot of picks, but pick the right.
Yeah, agree with you there. And with the cap coming down due to COVID, we've talked about it. That's going to be more and more vital. How many of your role players can contribute on rookie deals? That is really what we've seen define teams that have a Super Bowl window versus those that don't. Are you signing big ticket free agents on massive contracts, or do you have a lot of guys that are young on rookie deals that can contribute and get you there ahead of schedule? So with that, thank you all for tuning in. We hope you've really enjoyed this. Let us know if you have any trade hypotheticals you want to talk about. We're always interested in what people think might happen. These are some of the most interesting scenarios to play out and think about, oh, I like that, I don't like that, and kind of go over. So definitely let us know if you have any thoughts. And with that, I think we will sign off. Kenny, do you want to sign us out?
Yeah, man, laces out and go Fins.
All right, laces out. See you next week, everybody.